it is freezing here. All right. I remember last episode when we started doing Pigskin Frenzy on this past Thursday's episode, doing the Super Wildcard Frenzy episode for NFL Day. I said that this was going to be a very freezing weekend going into next week. It was going to be absolutely just frigid cold, and it is. It's currently where I'm at 5 degrees, and I'm wearing this big old, big hoodie here, Columbia hoodie right here, in case you don't see me on, YouTube. But it's freezing. It is absolutely freezing. I'm cold, but guess what? Just because you're cold doesn't mean you don't go to work on Tuesday and Thursdays, right? It means you keep pushing through, you keep staying the course. You saw what I did there, and you keep on pushing through. Guys, it is freezing, but that's not going to stop us from doing Pigskin Frenzy. Welcome to Pigskin Frenzy on this very frigidly, dangerously cold Tuesday afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm Joel Norris, and whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, listening on Podbean, listening on Apple, a big thank you for taking some time out of your Tuesday to just sit back, watch, and listen to some college football coverage presented by me. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like each episode, leave comments down below. Spotify, listening on there, share around with others, and follow on there as well. Same thing for Podbean, and the same thing for Apple. Instagram, X, and Facebook, we're on there. All you got to do is just type in Pigskin Frenzy, follow, like the pages there. You'll get episode updates. You will get news and highlights from across college and NFL football. There is a trivia question on today's Instagram story. Go and answer today's college football question, as well as all things up to date for Pigskin Frenzy. Guys, as many of you know, we were supposed to do a postseason 2023 college football Q&A. And we are going to do that. We're doing it next Tuesday instead of today. Today, we are going to dedicate this episode to the greatest coach of all time in college football history, the GOAT, head coach Nick Saban. He recently retired, and we are going to honor him by doing this episode today. We're going to talk about his greatest accolades, his moments as head coach, some of the most memorable games he's been in. We're going to talk about everything Nick Saban has accomplished. We're going to talk about how he's impacted the game of college football, as well as a little bit of a side note to conclude today's episode of Pigskin Frenzy, the future of Alabama football and their new head coach. You already know who he is. You already know who we're going to talk about. But I'm just letting you know, before we talk about it, that's what we're going to be doing. Subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Keep plugging in on Pigskin Frenzy there. Leave comments down below. Subscribe and like each episode. Podbean, Apple, Spotify, just share around with others. Keep plugging in on there as well. We are almost to 3,000 listeners on audio. And by the way, that's a big accomplishment. We are almost there. It's a big accomplishment when you just started almost a year ago, and it takes quite a while to build up your listeners when you don't have any listeners, and when you build up all your listeners. We're about to be at 3,000. That's incredible. Big thank you and shout out there. And just keep plugging. If you want to talk to me, ask questions, keep plugging to me on X, Instagram, and Facebook for all things Pigskin Frenzy. Guys, news broke last Tuesday and last week, or last Wednesday, my bad, last Wednesday, before we were doing the NFL episode of Pigskin Frenzy, that Nick Saban, the Alabama head coach, legendary Alabama head coach, had retired from coaching and had retired at the University of Alabama. And the thing is, everyone's thinking, oh, dude, he's 72 years old. It doesn't matter if he's 72 years old. He can still coach at 72 years old. He is the greatest coach to ever do it. And when you look at it, it comes as a big shock around everybody. Everybody else, years ago was probably thinking, yes, Nick Saban's retiring. He's gone. But those same people that listened to, saw and heard the news that he retired, they were like, he's retiring. Oh, and they were disappointed, because it's like, now what? You know what I mean? Now who are we gonna root against? Now what are we gonna do? When Nick Saban was the guy to root against, and it was fun competing against him, and it was fun to try to get that challenge of beating Nick Saban and beating Alabama. Now what? Right? And that was the question about everything. Now what? And he's retired. He is no doubt, without a shadow of a doubt, the greatest college football coach of all time. And it's a personal, it's a little bit of a story for me. Nick Saban came in, and just to recap the history of Nick Saban, he came in at Alabama. Well, let's just start off with this. He coached at Michigan State when I was before I was even born, and not only that, before I was up until I was born. I'm 23 years old, guys. This year I'll be 22. I'll be 24 this year. So you're thinking, are you serious? Really? Yeah. 24. But going on 24 in September and doing a podcast, right? So before I was even born, a year before I was even born, he was at Michigan State. He then took the head coaching job at LSU. But when I was born, he was the head coach at LSU up until I was 4 years old. He then went to pursue the NFL because the NFL called him. He went to pursue the NFL for 2 years as the Miami Dolphins head coach. He then, when I was 7 years old, when I was 6 years old, took on the job as Alabama head coach from early 2007 or late 2007 to 2020 to into 2023, early 2024, right till now. So when I was little, I started watching football around I was around 8 years old, and I've always wanted to do this. And the thing about this is guys like Nick Saban were the reason why I wanted to do sports broadcasting, to talk about football, because he made the sport fun. He grew the sport. Now, 2008 is when I started watching it. I immediately became an LSU fan because my brother was an LSU fan. So now I'm just a podcast host, guys. But go Tigers out there. So when you look at what happened, Nick Saban joins Alabama. My dad was a super notorious Alabama fan, and this is just a story for me. I'm not trying to ramble, but this is just a story, for the show, an interesting story for the show as we're dedicating this episode to Nick Saban. My dad, notorious Alabama fan, still is. He always asks me what's going on and wants to know what's happening in the sport because, of me doing this. So, notorious Bama fan. He still loves him to this day. Was sad that Saban retired, but I remember first year they played Florida in 2008. He was watching it. Florida beat him, and he said, now as a fan, I want their mission to go back and to beat Florida in the SEC championship next year. And what did Alabama do? They worked. They went to work. They won the West again. And not only that, they went against Florida and not only beat Florida, they blew them out in the SEC championship. In his third season in Alabama, Nick Saban. Not only this, his second season in Alabama, they go to the SEC championship. His third season, they go to the SEC championship and win the SEC championship and defeat Florida. They go to Pasadena and go to the national championship in the Rose Bowl against Texas, against Colt McCoy's Texas Longhorns and Mac Brown's Texas Longhorns. And they went, and Nick Saban got the win over Texas, and he won his first national championship at Alabama. He won one at LSU. He won his second at Alabama, which is his first at Alabama. And my dad, literally close to tears in his eyes, says, "We're back. We're back." And he does, because and that's just the start of it, because they were back. Before Nick Saban got there, Alabama was 18 years of downhill spiral after Bear Bryant and Gene Stallings left. It was down 15, 16 seasons of downhill spiral for Alabama. And then after that, he came and saw he conquered. He won his first national championship, lost in 2010, 2011, beat LSU in the national championship after a, triumphant, game back in November, 9-6, when LSU prevailed over Alabama. They go to the national championship in 2011, beat LSU in 2011. 2012, they go back-to-back national champions in Miami and beat Notre Dame. It took a little bit, because they lost to Auburn 2013. They go to the playoff, the first ever playoff semifinal in 2014, lost to Ohio State, who was then the eventual national champion. 2015, going into 2016, they beat Clemson, lost the next year in the national championship lost the national championship against Clemson the next year. 2017, they ended up beating Georgia beating Georgia in the national championship, and then lost to Clemson in that national championship the next year. 2020, they go back during the COVID year, beat Ohio State in the national championship, and that was Nick Saban's last ever national title. 7 national championships. He has eclipsed Paul Bear Bryant, as he had 6. Nick Saban has 7. Let's look at the accolades. As we just talk about it, let's look at the accolades that Nick Saban has done in college football. Because, guys, it is impressive what he has done. Because nobody has done what he has done. Absolutely nobody. As a guy who wasn't a fan of wasn't a fan of Alabama and everybody, not a fan of Alabama growing up, he is still the greatest college football coach ever done it. Let's look at the accolades, and then let's look at some of his top moments here. This is not going to be too long of an episode of Pigskin Frenzy. I'm not going to be an hour, but I mean, we're gonna talk about Nick Saban and gather our thoughts on what's happening here, because this is big. Last week, the greatest of all time just retired, and it has now shifted the whole sport. Welcome to the new era of college football, ladies and gentlemen. 7 national titles, like I just mentioned, most by any coach in college football history. This is per SEC Network and ESPN. Most by any coach in college football history. This is by the numbers. Only coach to win a national championship in 3 different decades. Now, let me tell you something. 3 different decades. He has won it in the early 2000s, the 2010s, and the 2020s. 3 different decades. The only coach in college football history to ever do that. That's impressive, ladies and gentlemen. That is very impressive. Next up, never had a losing season in his college football coaching career. Never has had a losing season. Even when he first started coaching at Alabama, that was not a losing season. It was, to Alabama standards now, it's a losing season. I mean, 7-6, but he had never had a losing season in his coaching career. Never in his college football coaching career. The only losing seasons he's had were in the NFL, but never in his college football coaching career. It's unbelievable. He has won double-digit win games each and every season. Even this season, they went 12-2 before he called it a day. I mean, it's unprecedented to think like that. I don't think any coach in college football right now has done that yet. Has not had a losing season throughout his whole career. At least a college football coach has had at least maybe one, right? So it's unbelievable. Only coach in SEC history with multiple Heisman winners. Those multiple Heisman winners were Mark Ingram back in 2009, Derrick Henry back in 2015, Devontae Smith, wide receiver Devontae Smith back in 2020. The first ever non-quarterback to win the trophy. Probably, I would say, since Derrick Henry. And then quarterback, 2021 Heisman winner, quarterback Bryce Young, the most recent Heisman winner, and last year's number 1 overall draft pick to the Carolina Panthers. The only coach in SEC history with multiple Heisman Trophy winners. Unbelievable. 49 first-round NFL draft picks. That is the most by any coach in college football history. 49 first-round NFL draft picks, and those include Will Anderson, recently, linebacker Will Anderson of the Houston Texans, quarterback, number 1 overall quarterback, his first ever number 1 overall player in the NFL draft, Bryce Young, going to the Carolina Panthers, Mark Ingram, he went to the Saints, Trent Richardson, Courtney Upshaw, you can go, the list goes on, Drake Kirkpatrick, the list goes on for Alabama. 49 first-round NFL draft picks by Nick Saban, most by any coach in NFL and in college football history. Another accolade, most by any coach in college football history, 16 straight 10-win seasons. 16 straight 10-win seasons. He's been there for 17 years. He only had 1 non-10-win season, and that was his first season. 16 straight 10-win seasons. That is incredible. It's mind-blowing to think how perfect and how great that is. In the 16 out of 17 years he's been there, he has had 16 straight 10 wins seasons. He has had double-digit win seasons every time he has been there. The thing about Nick Saban is what's so good about it is there have been coaches that have come and gone, and he has still been there winning national titles. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Another one, most by any coach in college football history, 109 weeks ranked number one in the AP poll. Number one ranked in the AP poll, 109 weeks ranked. That is the most by any coach in college football history. You're going to be hearing that a lot, most by any coach in college football history, because there's quite, I mean, I'll get to that in a minute. I'll get to what I was going to say in a minute. I'll do it. I can conclude that in the end. 104 wins versus AP ranked opponents. That is most by any coach in college football history. And last but not least, 9 wins over AP number one teams. That is the most by any coach in college football history. When you are looking and thinking, you're saying that a lot, most by any coach in college football history. Because quite frankly, what I was going to say just a minute ago was there's quite no one like Nick Saban. Just think about it. There is nobody in college football like Nick Saban. There's probably not going to be another Nick Saban. There won't be another Nick Saban. He's the greatest coach to ever do it. And all those accolades that he's got in numbers that proves that he's a legend. Not only a legend in this game, and he's the GOAT, that he is the greatest coach to ever do this. Hands down. And when you look at, everything that has come and gone, there's one thing that's remained, and that was Nick Saban winning at Alabama and building Alabama to what it is. And what he has done to build the program up, revive the program up again, that was once going astray after Bear Bryant and Gene Stallings left. Okay, so what he has done is probably unprecedented and probably won't happen again, especially in this time in college football. Some of his greatest moments, and I think some of his greatest moments include press conferences. When you look at what he was a funny coach. He was a hilarious coach, but he was a stern coach. What he wanted was to win the game, right? He wanted to win. When media would ask him, and these are some of his moments that he would do in press conferences and pregame pressers before he would go. The coach would get up against an LSU or an Ole Miss. They would ask questions that would just absolutely set him off. There was a few things that Nick Saban did not like, and that was questions that were obvious, and there were questions that were, speculative, like just speculative and speculation. He was never about speculation. He was never about, predicting and looking into it and looking into the future. He was always about focusing on the game ahead. And some of those moments include rat poison. That was probably my top moment as a fan watching the sport and just listening to him, at the post game presser, against A&M, rat poison, talking about, people feeding into stuff and just buying into it. And it was rat poison, right? It was just, it's quite remarkable because a lot of people nowadays, including Ole Miss head coach Lane Kiffin, use the word rat poison. It's hilarious. It was one of my favorite moments that Nick Saban presented, as the Alabama's head coach. Not only that, some of his moments about him being fired up, about, trying to win the game and, saying, I can't really say it on here because, family's watching and everything, but, excuse me, talking about, playing and how, they were getting ran on through a tune horn, and we can't say the words on this show, but that was another one of my favorite moments when he blew up, talking about, how they could not stop anything and how when they need to adjust that. And when people ask questions on what to do and how to be speculative about it, it kind of makes them mad. And there's quite some of those moments right there that are just made Nick Saban. An infamous moment from Nick Saban was when Maria Taylor was interviewing him post game, and they were deciding who was going to start. It was the next season after the national championship going into 2018, and it was after their opening win Maria Taylor was asking Nick Saban who was the starting quarterback. Was it Tua Tagovailoa or Jalen Hurts? And Saban kind of blew up and said he was not going to name him. Not everyone has been asking him about that, and I asked him how he was going to name the starter and who was going to be the starting quarterback. He said they're asking him if he's going to name it. He said he's not going to. So quit asking. That was a moment right there where it's become a meme in society. It's become a GIF in society. And when you look at it overall, he did apologize to Maria Taylor after that, because Maria Taylor would look quite uncomfortable after she asked him that question. She finished the interview. He was real, just kind of disgruntled, kind of aggravated about it. And he eventually did issue a formal apology to Maria Taylor and ESPN after that. And they all is forgiven. They made up. Everything's good between the two. But he wanted to, he just was upset about it. He was upset, and he was just did not like the speculative answers. He did not like, the same things being asked about, who was going to be the quarterback, who was going to be the quarterback between the two, because it's all speculation, and he wasn't about that. So that was one of the top moments in my book for Nick Saban. And just because of, of headlines that he drew, because some of the moments that he drew were headline moments. And there's never going to be a coach, who would do, there's a lot of coaches who do make headline moments but don't make multiple headline moments. That is not essential in the game of headline moments. That was Nick Saban. So those are some of my top moments of Nick Saban as we move on here. And not only for Nick Saban, let's talk about some more memorable games he's been in. Let's talk about in 2012 against LSU. That was a memorable game. LSU was winning that game. It was about 27 or 21. It was 17-14. LSU was up by 3. AJ McCarron, they were going down the field, and quarterback AJ McCarron threw it to Kenyon Drake, a screen pass. LSU blitzed on defense. He threw right into the blitz. Kenyon Drake ran it in for ran it in for a touchdown, and Alabama ended up winning the game 21-17 in 2012. In a highly anticipated rematch for the national championship that season, or after that season, going into 2012, Alabama ended up pulling out the win in Baton Rouge and beating LSU 21-17. Another memorable game. How about the national championship of the 2017 season going on at 2018? Alabama and Georgia. Kirby Smart's first national championship appearance as a head coach for the Georgia Bulldogs. It was a memorable game. They went on to play each other in the 2021 going on 2022 national championship game, where Georgia overcame the odds and defeated Alabama 30. I think it was about 34-18, or 31-18 was Georgia beating Alabama, or 34-18 beating, Alabama. So looking at that game and looking at the national championship beforehand, first appearance in 2017 for Kirby Smart in Georgia. Alabama was in it. At all SEC national championship once again. And not only that, he ended up, it was a close game. Georgia was winning in the first half, dominating on all aspects of the ball. And then Alabama marched back. Tua Tagovailoa came in late because Jalen Hurts was struggling. Tua Tagovailoa came in and ended up marching them down to a comeback. It was second and 25. And all of a sudden, Tua Tagovailoa throws a dart. Last second of the game, touchdown, or overtime of the game, touchdown to Devontae Smith, throws a dart, and Alabama wins the game and wins the national championship in a comeback national championship performance by Tua Tagovailoa, Nick Saban, and Alabama. An awesome game, a memorable game looking at it, and those are some 2 highlight wins. I'll even go another highlight win for him, a memorable game for him. The national championship, his first one in Alabama. I remember watching that where my dad did tear up and say, "We're back. We're back." Marcel Darius was a key component in that game on D-line. All over Colt McCoy, all over Garrett Gilbert, all over Texas. And Alabama, Mark Ingram was a force to be reckoned with on offense. Alabama wins the 2009, going on 2010 national championship. in Pasadena, his first national championship at Alabama. And that was a memorable win for him, a memorable game that I watched when I was a little boy growing up as a football fan. So those are some memorable games, some memorable wins. He's also been a part of some memorable losses that we won't forget. One of them was the kick six in the Iron Bowl in 2013. It was a close game. I think it was Cade Foster. He did not have the leg. He was kicking it on the way. No, did not have the leg. Chris Davis returned it back and returned it all the way for a touchdown. Everyone thought he was going to be tackled going in, going into overtime at Auburn, and it did not work out. And it ended up being ran back for a kick six, touchdown Alabama. I watched that when I was 13 years old. And as a 13-year-old watching that game and watching Auburn beat Nick Saban in Alabama, going on touchdown, and it was just quite incredible. Quite incredible. Not only that, another memorable loss that we wouldn't forget was the 9-6 game between LSU and Alabama in 2011. And when you look at, how low scoring that game was and how many star-studded players were in that game, was just quite impressive. There were a lot of first-round draft picks between the two teams in that game. 9-6, defensive battle through the end. They went into overtime. It was 3-3 in overtime. Then it goes to 6-6, and then 9-6. LSU ends up winning the game in Tuscaloosa. They went on to the national championship where Bama got his revenge, 21-0. That's another thing about Nick Saban. Revenge games, okay? Revenge games. Nick Saban in revenge games did not lose many revenge games. Let me tell you what. There has only been a handful of times where he has lost back-to-back seasons to the same team. And it is not many, okay? That's how great he is. It wasn't many. Les Miles and LSU did it in 2010 and 2011. Hugh Freeze with Ole Miss did it in 2014 and in 2015. There's just not many. There is not many. So props to him, and just props to what he has done at Alabama. The assistance that he has given to us in the coaching tree. When you look at guys like Kirby Smart, obvious one at Georgia, he is now the college football king right now since Saban is retired. Kirby Smart's now taking up that mantle. You got Ole Miss head coach Lane Kiffin at the number 2. I mean, you got Texas head coach Steve Sarkisian moving to the SEC in 2024. You have guys like Oregon head coach Dan Lanning, who was rumored at first to take the head coaching job and replace Nick Saban in Alabama. He has announced that he is staying at Oregon. So Oregon head coach Dan Lanning. You got Jim McElwain, who is at Central Michigan. Go Chippewas. You have Billy Napier at Florida, who is now a head coach. I mean, you had Jimbo Fisher. You had who was at LSU, his offensive coordinator at LSU, and then who went on to coach at Florida State and replace Bobby Bowden. Who went on to Florida State to be Bobby Bowden's OC, then replaced Bobby Bowden's head coach, then went on to be head coach at Texas A&M. And then you look at Will Muschamp. Will Muschamp, defensive coordinator. He went on to be, a head coach at Florida and South Carolina, then went on to be more assistants at Auburn, and went on to be an assistant at now Georgia. So with Kirby Smart. So the guy that he coached with at LSU, who was Kirby Smart, was an assistant for Saban at LSU. Mario Cristobal, who coached at Oregon and now is the head coach at Miami. He was a defensive assistant an offensive assistant for Nick Saban. You got Butch Jones, who went to coach at Tennessee and now is coaching at Arkansas State. You had Jeremy Pruitt, right? The list goes on. Jeremy Pruitt, who was defensive coordinator at Alabama, who then went on to coach at Tennessee as their head coach. So you go on and on about the assistants that he has brought under his wing and how many people that he has impacted professionally and personally in college football. It's just quite impressive. I mean, there's not going to be much like Nick Saban, and that's the truth. of this episode. The bottom line of this episode is this. And now we're going to move toward as how he impacted the game before we conclude today's episode of Pigskin Frenzy for the future of Alabama. How he impacted the game. And that's one reason how he impacted the game professionally. He revived careers. Lane Kiffin, Steve Sarkisian, to be exact. Those are two top guys who he has revived. He has revived those two in a sense because Lane Kiffin was fired. He was fired from USC. Did not know what was going to come out of it. Did not know what was going to happen. But Nick Saban took a chance. He hired him as Alabama offensive coordinator. And then he ended up taking the job at FAU. Then he ended up taking the job after FAU to Ole Miss, and here we are. He has revived his career, led Ole Miss to its 11-win season, its first 11-win season in their football history. Nick Saban, you look at what Kirby Smart has done, defensive coordinator, learned from the best for all these years, bide his time. The Georgia job opened up. His alma mater's job opened up. He went back home to be a head coach at Georgia. They hired him. It took him a bit. It took him from, he started in 2014. He's been there for 9 to 10 years now. But it took him about 4 seasons to make it to the playoff. Georgia did make it to the playoff. They went to the national championship. They lost. But then after that, they were consistently in it. New Year's Six bowls. Then they went back to the playoffs. And then, not only that, went back to the playoffs, won in the playoffs, won their first national championship in 2021, 2022. Then they went back-to-back national champions, just like his old coach Nick Saban did going into 2023. Beat TCU 65-7, put up the largest margin of victory in bowl history until that was eclipsed by guess who? Kirby Smart in Georgia this season in the Orange Bowl against Florida State. Back-to-back national champions. He's won 2 national championships, had 3 college football playoff appearances, multiple New Year's Six bowl appearances, and that was because of Nick Saban. He's built a powerhouse elite program, #1 recruiting classes because of Nick Saban and what he's done for Kirby Smart. And now Kirby Smart in Georgia, it's looking like it's going to be their era look at what he's doing there. So look at that. Steve Sarkisian, for example. Let's talk about him. Washington, USC jobs. He ended up, going on a downhill spiral personally, and that's what cost him his job as USC head coach. No one knew what was going to do. No one knew what was going to happen, but he took a chance. He took a chance on Steve Sarkisian, and he was all about second chances. He took a chance on him, made him his OC, ended up leaving for the Texas job after being there for a couple of seasons and leading for the Texas head coaching job, and has now led Texas to a college football playoff, recruiting at a high level, going to the SEC, ended up beating his old coach Nick Saban this past season in Tuscaloosa. Excuse me. Nick Saban, Mike Locksley, OC at Alabama, and going on 2019 season, led him to a national title. He ended up leaving for the Maryland head coaching job. He's still coaching at Maryland to this day. He's building up solid offenses, and Maryland is something to play against, something to fear against because Mike Locksley's there. That's all because of Nick Saban. What he has done is never going to be duplicated. He is the greatest. The impact that he's had on the game professionally is bar none. The impact that he's had personally for fans out there is he brought excitement. He brought challenges. He brought memorable games for everybody to see. He brought a run that everybody was kind of hating on because they wanted to be where he was, but in reality they can't disrespect it. They got to respect it for what he's done because there's never going to be anything like him. There's never going to be a dynasty where he has won 7 national championships, where he's won 6 straight national titles at one school. There's not going to be anything like that. The impact that he has had on the game, personally, bringing us classics of games, win or lose, is just, it's simply iconic. the impact that he's had, and it's a tremendous impact. There's never going to be an impact quite like Nick Saban has made on this sport. And for that being said, thank you. And this is going to be our conclusion of talking about Nick Saban now and dedicating this episode to Nick Saban. We're going to talk about Alabama here in a little bit to conclude today's episode of Pigskin Frenzy. But just to say thank you for all the memorable moments that you've given us. Thank you for, a great, run at the top for 16 seasons at Alabama and 17 seasons at Alabama. And just thank you for quite a run that you have done here for college football and presenting us challenging games, presenting us games that, brought us to the edge of our seats. Thank you for presenting us moments and laughable moments that we look and say, hey, there's not going to be another Nick Saban. And there's not going to be another Nick Saban. Thank you for everything you've done for college football. Thank you for everything you've done for, not just Alabama, but for everybody, like people like me who are in covering this sport and was covering football because of people like you making it so entertaining. So thanks to Nick Saban, and we wish him well here at Pigskin Frenzy, the best of all in his endeavors, and we wish him well and his wife, Miss Terry, and his family in retirement, and wish him well in general. So Nick Saban, the greatest college football coach to ever do it. Now, before we conclude today's episode of Pigskin Frenzy, let's talk about the future of Alabama football, because Alabama was in shambles. I mean, everybody's going to be in shambles when the greatest of all time retires. So when you look at it, when you look at everything, you're thinking, okay, who is going to step up? Who is going to take his place? Because walking in those shoes are going to be kind of hard, right? You would be almost terrified to follow in the footsteps of greatness like that, because you can't replace Nick Saban, okay? Just bottom line, you cannot replace a Nick Saban. However, you can be the best coach that you can be, the best you can be at Alabama. So they were looking. Dan Lanning was an option. He ended up announcing that he was not going to come back. Then they reversed course to Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin said he was returning to Ole Miss. Scratch that off the board. Then they focused their attention on Florida State head coach Mike Norvell and Steve Sarkisian from Texas. Both of them said, I'm moving to the SEC anyway. Steve Sarkisian said, no, I'm going to the SEC anyway. I'm returning at Texas. Mike Norvell said, I'm happy at Florida State. He marked his name off, and he signed an extension with Florida State as well. So sign that extension. When you look at the game itself, there was nobody else. So you're thinking, okay, there's one name. Washington head coach Kalen DeBoer. And honestly, he was up there on my list. It was either Dan Lanning, Lane Kiffin, Kalen DeBoer, or Steve Sarkisian. Those were my names that I had personally had to replace Nick Saban. And I was right on one of them at least. Alabama has hired Washington head coach Kalen DeBoer as their next head coach. Kalen DeBoer, man, let's talk about him for a little bit and what he's done. Kalen DeBoer, and let me pull up my notes here on Kalen DeBoer. What he's done was incredible. Not even just at the NCAA level, and what he's done, it's unbelievable. He played his career at Sioux Falls, in South Dakota. Sioux Falls, was a wide receiver in 1996. 1997, he was a wide receivers coach for Sioux Falls. Washington High School, he went as their sports director assistant. He went back to Sioux Falls as their offensive coordinator, and from 05 to 09, he was their head coach. He went to Southern Illinois, offensive coordinator and wide receiver coach. He went to Eastern Michigan as their offensive coordinator and quarterback coach. 2007 and 2018, Fresno State offensive coordinator and quarterback coach. He then went to Indiana as their offensive coordinator and quarterback coach in 2019. And then in 2020 to 2021, Fresno State head coach. 2022 and 2023 for the next 2 years, Washington's head coach, and now going on this season in 2024 in the new era of college football, Alabama's head coach. So from 2019 to now, in 2019, which was like 5 years ago, he was Indiana's offensive coordinator. Now he's Alabama's head coach. That's crazy storytelling right there at its finest in college football. His overall record, he's 104-12. Okay, 104-12. He's 2-1 in bowls, 1-1 in the college football playoff, and he's 17-2 in NAIA playoffs. He's had 3 NAIA championships in 2006, '08, and 2009 as Sioux Falls head coach. GPAC, 4-time conference champion, 2006, 2009. One-time Pac-12 conference champion, which is the final Pac-12 championship as we know it. 3-time AFCA NAIA Coach of the Year, 2006, '08, and '09. 3-time NAIA Coach of the Year in '06, '08, and '09. 2-time Pac-12 Coach of the Year from 2022 and 2023, the 2 years that he was at Washington. The 2-time AP Pac-12 Coach of the Year, the 2 times he's been there. The Eddie Robinson Coach of the Year award winner in 2023, the Home Depot Coach of the Year award winner, the Sporting News Coach of the Year award winner, the Walter Camp Coach of the Year, and the AP Coach of the Year for 2023 this past season. The reigning defending Coach of the Year for this year is Kalen DeBoer from Washington. And they landed him. They landed him to replace. He went 14-1 with Washington and led him to a national championship and a loss against Michigan, which I kind of find funny because Nick Saban's last game as head coach of Alabama, he lost to Washington. He lost to Michigan. And then they get a guy that also lost to Michigan this season in the national championship, which I thought kind of funny and unique. But Kalen DeBoer, nonetheless, is a proven winner. He's a winner everywhere he's been. He has won games everywhere he's been. That's proven track record. He is a solid football coach. It is a great hire. Now, I would like to say give him a chance now because, look, the staff that he's creating there is unbelievable. Washington offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb is finally a part of the Tide. Alabama was trying to go after him last season. Nick Saban was trying to go after him last season, but he turned the job down to stick with Kalen DeBoer. Now he is in Tuscaloosa. Ryan Grubb is now the new Alabama offensive coordinator under Kalen DeBoer, and they're going to get to work because that offense is going to be solid with Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb there for the 2024 season. That is going to be an excellent staff that he is putting together. Washington wide receiver coach Jamarcus Shepard, he ended up going from Washington to Alabama as their wide receiver coach. The guys who produced Roma Dunze, Jalen McMillan, and Jalen Polk, guys who are now going to the NFL and playing on Sunday. So Jamarcus Shepard and what he is doing there, did at Washington, and what he's going to do at Alabama is going to be incredible. He is keeping some guys, running back coach and associate head coach Robert Gillespie, who may become just a running back coach and associate coach, may become Ryan Grubb at this point. But Alabama, he's building a staff full of guys that he is retaining from Saban's staff and guys that he is bringing on from his electrifying Washington staff. Now, defense, we don't know what's going on the defense side of things with Kalen DeBoer yet, but we're going to find out eventually. So when you look at Kalen DeBoer and what he is building there, one, he's got to re-recruit all the players that were coming to play for Nick Saban. He is doing that now. He's going to have a good signing class, solid signing class, and recruit well. He's got to build a staff since he is not familiar with the South just yet. He is not familiar with the SEC recruiting just yet. He's got to build a staff to help him recruit at the highest level in the Southeastern Conference. Those are quite a few things that Kalen DeBoer has to do now that he's Alabama head coach. Now, when you look at Alabama head coach, when you look at Kalen DeBoer, it's not a bad hire. But I'm just going to tell Alabama fans now, he is going to be Kalen DeBoer. He's not going to be Nick Saban. So when he loses some games, when it's a game where he is close, but it ends up being a no cigar game, he ends up losing, do not jump on the, let's get rid of Kalen DeBoer train. Okay. Let's not jump on that train just yet. I understand the mentality and I understand the standard that Nick Saban has set for this program. But with Kalen DeBoer now at coach, he is going to do his best to be the best coach that he can possibly be for this program. But you got to give him time. You got to give him time to recruit the best classes. You got to give him time to build up once again. And you got to give him time to try to go to the playoffs and lead this team to a national championship. Because if Kalen DeBoer, with the staff he's got on offense, an offense like he had at Washington, he can bring that to Alabama, and Alabama can go to a national championship and potentially win a national championship with Kalen DeBoer. Why? Because of the talent that Alabama can produce. If he produces talent like he did at Washington and Alabama, they could easily go back to the mountaintop and win a national championship with Kalen DeBoer easily. So What I'm saying is give him time and be patient with him. Now, if he's not producing, right, and they aren't doing what Alabama needs him to do, then I understand that. But right off the bat, if they lose one game or two games, or three games or four games, even, because now we're in a day where Nick Saban is gone and Alabama may not lose only just two games. They could win, they could lose three or four now, maybe. But who knows? We just don't know yet. But you got to give DeBoer and you got to give Kalen DeBoer patience and give him some time to work on what he needs to work on as the next head coach of this team. He is seeking counsel from Nick Saban. Saban has an office in Bryant-Denny Stadium that he will come to every now and then, and he will give advice and kind of oversee Kalen DeBoer a little bit and give him some advice on what he has to do at Alabama, right? So be patient with Kalen DeBoer and give him some time. Just give him some time. He's not Nick Saban. Nobody will be Nick Saban. But I'm going to tell you this, Kellen DeBoer is a solid coach, and he will be Kellen DeBoer, and he will be, to me, a good fit for Alabama. So the future of Alabama, to me, looks bright. And I think it's a bright future. I think they're going to be okay. I don't think they're going to go down. I think they're going to be a solid team, and they're going to be a team to look out for when Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb deliver something special on offense. But hopefully they work on the defensive side of things as well. And Kalen DeBoer produces a fantastic team in 2024 in his first season as Alabama's new head football coach. Guys, that just about does it for Pigskin Frenzy. A big thank you for taking some time out of your Tuesday to just sit back, watch, and listen to some college football coverage presented by me. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like each episode, leave comments down below. Spotify, Podbean, and Apple. All you have to do is just, share around with others and follow on there as well. Instagram, X, and Facebook. All you have to do is type in Pigskin Frenzy, follow, like the pages there. You'll get episode updates. You'll get news and highlights from across college and NFL football. You will get trivia questions on Instagram stories. Go and answer today's college football trivia question, as well as all things up to date for Pigskin Frenzy. Guys, we will be back Thursday. We have Super Wild Card Weekend coverage that we are going to get to, and we're going to preview and predict the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. So more games to predict for the NFL playoffs, and we're coming down to the home stretch of the NFL season here shortly. We're going to cover it. We're going to preview and predict it. We're going to talk about who's in and who's out, and we're going to dive deep into the NFL and its news once again, especially when it comes towards playoffs. Playoff football, going to discuss it Thursday. Tune in then. I'm Joel Norris signing off, and once again, congratulations to Nick Saban on a wonderful career. Wish him nothing but the best in his retirement. Good luck to Kalen DeBoer as he takes over at Alabama. Thank you for everything, guys, and for everybody out there, stay the course.